Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna light it up. Tonight, we're gonna light it up. Tonight, we're gonna light it up. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna light it up. Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna light it up. Tonight, we're gonna light it up. Tonight, we're gonna light it up. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna light it up.
Ember. Oh, Ember.
Miss Ember.
Oh, great, Ember. Tell me what I'm doing.
Appreciate you, Ember.
Love Ember. She's great.
Bottom of the barrel Ember bullshit.
Oh my God, Ember.
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 We love you, Ember.
You rock at that, Ember.
Ember is the queen.
We're neighbors, Ember.
I see you, Ember.
Hey, Ember is hot.
Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. We survived another week. I mean, well, hopefully you did if you're watching, and if you didn't and you're watching, you'll have to let me know your secrets because, you know, we could make a lot of money with that kind of information. Today we're going back the fucking time before writing, before laws, before religions, possibly. Who's to say? We're going back to a pre-pottery civilization, as far back as we've been able to go so far. And what we found there indicates there's probably farther still to go before we find the beginning, if there even is such a thing. After all, we have proto-humans differentiating from our common ancestor with chimpanzees already making stone tools, which is why they're chimpanzees who make stone tools. So who is to say where humanity began? But it seems likely there's so much more to learn. And it seems as though religion, not necessarily of the formal do as the holy man says and pay your taxes sort of way, but in the belief in some supernatural explanation for things and a faith that things will turn out okay, even though they usually don't. has been with us for a very, very long time. Before we get into things, I do want to make a note that I'm trying to do the clip contest thing I mentioned yesterday. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm trying really hard to grow the channel this year. And one of the ideas that came to me was to do a contest for clips. If you make clips from the episodes and share them around and so forth, we do 2 prizes. One is the funniest clip to make it around. And of course, you have to let me know it's there so I can, put it in the running for funniest, but that'll be decided by vote. And the winner will get a special emoji for that whole month. And the other is similar, but it's most effective, which will be determined by analytics. And that person will also get an emoji. But I'm not sure how to make a playlist out of just clips. I was trying it for an hour or 2 last night, and no matter which way I did it, it ended up putting the whole episode into the playlist and not just the clips. So if you have some ideas about that, let me know. All righty. And of course, we're here. If you're watching in the future, hello, future people. We're here every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern, covering different assorted scholarly adjacent topics. I try to keep it interesting, or at least educational, or possibly do that the other way. I'm a little bit off today. As many of you know, I've been dealing with a lot of medical issues for the past several months. Pluses and minuses. I am still alive, so there's that. But I have an appointment for a procedure in the next city over tomorrow, and my car's missing. My driveway is no longer full of snow, but my car is just missing. Hopefully it'll wander back by tomorrow, but it's causing me a little bit of stress today. So, I don't know. It's a white car. Maybe the plow guy took it away. The plow guy hasn't been by. I can see it's not important. Suffice it to say, real world things getting in the way. But if you're new here, take a minute, hit the subscribe button. It helps a lot. Maybe share this video with people who want to learn about different interesting things every day. Yesterday we had Dr. Kip over to talk about the first laws, and that went very interesting places that nobody expected, but I hope y'all enjoyed. Now today, as you might expect, we are going to, well, this isn't where you probably thought. This is Karahan Tepe, which is like Göbekli Tepe. They're about the same age. They're both ancient sites, like the pre-pottery age, like 11,000 years ago age, back when humans weren't supposed to have settlements yet age, Neolithic. And yet they had something that looks an awful lot like a city, doesn't it? Now, they don't have proper streets. Most of their buildings are single room, but there's buildings with architecture and function and arguably art, and quite possibly in the big round middle area, possibly religion, or at least supernatural cult stuff of some kind. Who's to say? Who's to say? Now, quick introduction. I went with Karahan Tepe because Göbekli Tepe has a big old covering over it now, so you can't view it in the same way anymore because there's stuff in the way. Here is an older image before they built the covering, but they also hadn't excavated very much of the site. It's still pretty neat, though. There's quite a lot of site there. You can see in these areas, these long divides between areas are the different dig areas. These aren't part of the site. They're just areas that haven't been excavated yet because they're excavating block by block in a grid pattern, so they can keep track of where things are and how they find them and such. So there's an area like that in Karahan that has since been excavated because it happens to go through the middle of a building. Such is life, but it's fascinating. It's interesting stuff. Göbekli Tepe is perhaps the best known and probably the oldest, but it also has arguably the coolest temple. The Karahan Tepe temple is bigger, but the one at Göbekli has more monuments in the middle of it. So this is This is the general site. It's near the border with Syria. Interestingly, it sort of overlooks the headwaters of the Euphrates. It's almost like if you start at the Euphrates and you follow it all the way to the end, and then go back 11,000 years to when the river went a little further, you'd be at Göbekli Tepe. Interesting. Say lovey. So let's see what this article says about it. Originally named Potbelly Hill, the Turkish pronunciation, I can't even pronounce the pronunciation. Let's see how the website pronounces it.
Göbekli Tepe.
Okay, wasn't that far off. I still can't pronounce that, though. It was worth a try. It's a Neolithic archaeological site in Upper Mesopotamia. Now, again, we're looking at like the border of Turkey. We don't think of Asia Minor as being part of Mesopotamia, but if you look, the edge of the mountains is further north. So it is actually in the Mesopotamian region. Actually, it's sort of the interface between the Mesopotamian region and the Levantine region. If you went up, bounced off the mountains, and came back down along the Mediterranean coast, you'd be in what would become the Holy Land. And that's one of the reasons this semi-highland region is kind of important, because it is an interface between the river-based Fertile Crescent and the Eastern Mediterranean Fertile Crescent. They kind of meet there before you run into mountains. And that's kind of interesting. So the settlement was inhabited. Now, to be clear, it was never permanently inhabited. At least that seems to be the consensus among archaeologists at the moment. But there were permanent buildings. Now, people may have been there all year, but it seems to be, at least the general idea that I seem to be getting from archaeologists, is that people would come and go. Like one tribe would move in, stay a few months, another tribe would move in, and they'd move out, and they'd keep doing their thing. Or possibly there were a few permanent residents. These places were inhabited for centuries, so the practices probably shifted over time. But it could well be there were a handful of permanent residents, like a physician, for lack of a better term, a high priest, a record keeper, something like that, a law keeper, almost certainly some kind of judge, who may have stayed there permanently, and other people would come and go as needed or with the seasons. It could have been winter housing, and what we perceive to be temples might just have been the Great Lodge where everybody camped out together during the harshest parts of winter because they didn't have enough houses for everyone. It's hard to say. We still have a lot of digging to do, but what we found is pretty fucking cool so far. I do want to recognize that Ryan was first. She got a comment in way before the stream started. And Lil of All Trades got our first super chat in for the day. Lil sent $2 and said first super chat, which is factually accurate. So thank you. I get a little carried away sometimes, but I try. Like I said, I'm a little flustered today, but we're doing our best. We're trying to keep things going and dive in. There's so much information about these sites, Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, and the other sites, that it's like it's hard to know where to begin. Because we're like learning in reverse order. We're looking backwards from the present, and we find amazing, cool shit every year. And there's so much more we still have to find. So yeah, Upper Mesopotamia, which apparently is called Al Jazeera. That's interesting. In modern-day Turkey, the settlement was inhabited around 9,500 BCE to at least 8,000 BCE during the pre-pottery Neolithic. Now, that's important because we talk about, like, prehistoric being before writing. Pre-pottery means I don't know what people think when they hear that, because we can see these people were capable of buildings, architecture, carving, various arts just because they didn't have clay technology necessarily. In fact, at Karahan Tepe, we found bowls and plates and things. They're just carved out of rock instead of sculpted out of clay, which, you know, clay is obviously much easier to make, but they weren't that far off. They had plaster. We found plaster on the walls at Karahan Tepe, and the mixture for making plaster, it isn't the same as for making clay and pottery, but it's in the same general realm of technology. You're processing and mixing various dirts. Plaster's mostly gypsum, but I mean, if you don't have material science, it's all different dirts, really. I digress. The point is, they could have theoretically had pottery technology this far back and didn't use it for whatever reason. Possibly no kilns? Maybe. It's hard to say. They have bricks. Well, they have stone in brick shapes because they had stone cutting. But I digress. Miranda sends us a super chat for $10. Thank you, Miranda. And says, okay, but your car is missing? WTF. Right? I don't know. Like, I looked out the window this morning because this is my last cup of coffee. This is it. I am out. And I was like, maybe I can sneak to the store because it stopped snowing. I mean, the roads are still crap, but at least there's roads, right? And I'm like, maybe I can sneak out. And there's no cars in the driveway. Now, during a weekday, that's not super unusual that the other three housemates' cars are gone, because every now and then, all three of them go to work at the same time. It's not often, but it does happen. But my car's not there, too. And I'm like, what the... Maybe they moved all the cars so that a plow guy could come sometime today, but no one told me or asked me or informed me where the hell my car would be. And that's a little frustrating, shall we say. But thank you, Miranda. I appreciate it. And I'll try to let y'all know what the hell happens with my car. I'm fairly confident it'll mysteriously reappear, because the thing is, I live with 3 gay men. They're men. They're absolute shit at communication. They just do things, they just move things around, and then you have to guess what the hell is going on. I don't see any signs that a tow truck came by and swiped my car. You know, I used to be a repossession agent, and when you tow truck a car, you generally, you know, see the tracks from the dually wheels and the mark of the flatbed and the winch chains dragging things and whatnot. And also, I wouldn't expect one anyway, because I'm still up. Somehow, I'm still up to date with my car payments, despite not having a regular paycheck in nearly 8 months now. I'm going to stop talking about that because I'm going to get much more stressed. Let's continue on. Tangents. People come here for the tangents. It is known. It is so well known. We have a shirt about it. All right. So I'm going to pop back over here because this is a video giving us updates on what we've discovered over the course of 2025 about the sites. And we'll get more into the background information, but I want to give this guy, this presenter, a chance to lay out the newest stuff, because often that's the coolest stuff, and it'll hopefully give us a point of departure to talk about the other stuff we know, because there's so much stuff. We need somewhere to go from, you know? So we'll pop back to the beginning and see what's up.
Over the past week or so, dozens of incredible new discoveries in southeastern Turkey have been announced, and they date back to between 10 and 11,000 years ago, as archaeologists have showcased to the media their most exciting finds of 2025. The finds span the famous Tashtapela sites, including Göbekli Tepe, Karahan.
So this is the map of the known sites so far. Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, but there's a bunch of other smaller settlements, some of which may be even older. But, you know, people get really impressed with size.
Tepe, Seyberg, Sefer Tepe, and more. And I have to say, you won't be disappointed. From a huge rectangular building, an amphitheatre and colossal statues.
This is outrageously cool, and we're gonna get back to this. But while we're here, I want you to notice in the center on the floor here, there is a stone bowl. So yeah, they're a pre-pottery culture in that we're not finding any pottery shards, but they still had bowls, right? So they weren't like completely deprived of the benefits of what we normally get out of pottery. They just had to carve them out of stone. But more importantly, this is carved directly into the bedrock. This isn't just stacking up rocks in ridiculously smooth looking walls. Like ridiculous. We don't see fieldstone walls that smooth today. But this is carved out of the bedrock with Stone Age equipment. These straight lines, these sharp edges. This would be impressive today. 11,000 years ago.
To intricate jewellery, amulets and animal sculptures, 2025 has certainly been a year of discovery. Göbekli Tepe is now certainly...
This is current day Göbekli Tepe, and this is what I mean about the cover. It's a protective cover to keep the weather off, because a lot of the carvings are limestone and shit and are super vulnerable to the elements. They're also stupid old, but details. But also to help protect the people as well as the site. Like there's a lot of reasons for the covering. But it makes it impossible to get one of those big old drone shots like we can get from Göbekli or Karahan Tepe. So it's I think the coolest temple structure in the middle, but we can't see it the same. I mean, for one thing, there's way more T-pillars here. There are T-pillars at Karahan, but they're way more common here. And the T-pillars are really important for a whole bunch of different reasons. One of them being they seem to indicate roofs, because it isn't obvious there's a roof, right? Because whatever a roof is made of, whether it's thatch or cloth or hide or whatever, it isn't going to survive 11,000 years. So the only way we think we know there's a roof or was a roof is because that's the most logical reason for thinner pillars with wide tops to support a roof, which is really neat. And speaking of support, welcome to Katie Bluebird for becoming a supporter, joining membership. At the match level, you get all the custom emojis, which are voted on mostly by the members. Occasionally, I'll replace an old one that never gets used with something that people might find fun or funny. There's a few of them. That level of membership is just 99 cents a month, less than the cost of a cup of coffee. You can help support this channel and, you know, hopefully help me afford more coffee, whatever the hell I can actually get out of here. But I digress. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy all the various goodies.
Just one of many incredible sights from this remote epoch, and as our understanding deepens, even more questions arise. In this video, I'll talk you through what we know about the...
Some of these carvings, they're not necessarily new from this year, but these aren't things carved into things you're building anyway, which is cool enough in its own right. These are independent carved things. Art for art's sake, not art on a thing that already exists. Which is very interesting, because in order to have this level of creativity, you have to have a certain level of civilizational security, right? Like you can produce some art while being a hunter-gatherer, right? Like you can whittle bones and things, do the scrimshaw thing, right? And make little artistic pieces while you're doing your normal hunter-gatherer stuff in your downtime. But to carve stone like this for the sake of having a carving, that requires a certain higher level of not just ability, but availability. It means someone's got to be feeding you, probably. Not 100%. I mean, after all, there are people today who make art as a part-time thing. But we also have the luxury of living in a more advanced civilization where we have more part-time free in a much older civilization where you spend most of your time hunting, gathering, and apparently building your city when you're not hunting and gathering. Having time for art indicates at least a place of prestige in the society or a greater degree of social safety net, shall we say? People taking care of each other, which is a fundamental aspect of having a civilization. You also don't always, not always, but often, make art to show other people. Not always, but that can be a factor too.
Latest discoveries and showcase them to the world in all their glory. Hello everybody.
Oh hey, I have that background music. I don't use it often, but I've got it around here somewhere.
And welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe to the channel for regular content on ancient architecture, as well as all the latest news.
No, we don't do regular content on ancient architecture, though I do find the subject very fascinating. But this channel, it appears to be human run, so I will mention it. It's literally Ancient Architects. They've got 631 subscribers. This video is from a month ago because it's the update for what we found in 2025. It's pretty neat. So yeah, if you're into that sort of thing, check them out. They may have more cool civilizations.
News from the world of archaeology. Before November 2025, we already saw the announcement of some incredible new discoveries as archaeologists found a human statue in the wall of an oval building of Quebec.
Now, this is an interesting thing because, first of all, we find the statue buried in this wall, but also this is not the same kind of wall we see in wall buildings, right? So what's going on here? Because for a long time, the consensus seems to be that the reason the buildings at Göbekli Tepe and some of the other tepes are filled in with dirt isn't just because of normal wind and blowing and so forth, that some of them were filled in on purpose. Possibly because the civilization was leaving the area and they didn't want their stuff ruined by whoever comes next. But we don't really know. Any possibility is speculative. The only reason we think that is because some parts were filled in decades or even centuries before other parts, but they do appear to have been filled in on purpose. And the fact that this statue was buried under bricks or rocks rather that were piled on purpose, but not for the purpose of being a structural wall, maybe that's part of it too. I might suggest that it was the people who drove the people who built these places out and wanted to unmake their sacred places, block them up, bury their statues, fill the whole thing in so that the sites will be lost, not just to those people, but for all time. Sort of like a destruction of Carthage sort of thing. Ruin the site so they can't ever come back. But they didn't ruin the site as thoroughly as they could have. Like the T-pillars, for example. Those could have been knocked down, and they weren't. So that probably isn't entirely the story either. We may never know for sure what the hell happened, but it's a very compelling mystery. Speaking of compelling, Rainbow Ash seems to have been compelled to become a member. Thank you, Rainbow Ash. I hope you also appreciate all the fun emojis and things because, you know, people love emojis, or so I've been told, and it does help a lot. So I appreciate it.
Tepe, and we also saw this T-shaped pillar with the human face at Karahan Tepe.
Right, this is a new one this year too. Like we've seen T-pillars with carvings on them, and we can almost date them in chronological order based on how sophisticated the carvings are. Like they used this style of architecture for a very long time, and the art matures over how new the thing is. But this is the first time that I'm aware of we found a human face shape. Now, it's a very basic human face shape. It's basically just a T engraving kind of thing. But we know from this and from other similar carvings that it's clearly meant to be representative of a human face shape, and possibly the beginnings of what would eventually become hieroglyphics. Instead of carving an entire image, we would start to make it into a symbol that represented the image, which would eventually become like a carved pattern instead of like a full-on. It's taking the statue, turning it into a shape, turning it into a drawing, turning it into a letter kind of thing.
I've made videos on both of these finds, linked below in the description, and so I won't go into the finer details just now. But at the end of this video, I'd urge everybody to check these out to get a full update on the finds from 2020.
This is a thing that I need to get better at. Plugging previous videos and explaining why people should go watch those next if they haven't already. Because an interesting thing about YouTube is a lot, no matter which video you look at, your analytics will show you that a pretty decent portion of viewers of any given thing are viewing something for the first time. And while they might like what they see and decide to subscribe, they aren't necessarily going to go back and watch previous videos. So I need to get better at promoting past videos. I need to get better at promoting a lot of things. I am just not a good marketing girl. I'm just here.
25. Now for this video, I'm going to start at Karahan Tepe. In October 2024, I got to see this enigmatic ancient site in person for the very first time. And one of the most exciting aspects of this visit was watching as archaeologists excavated a never-before-seen oval building.
Now that is really cool to see the archaeologists at work. It's very slow work, which is one of the reasons that these kind of updates get done, monthly, if you're really into it like this fella, or yearly if you're more of a generalist sort of thing. So you can see what's happening year over year. But to be on site while they're finding the cool things can be really cool. It requires a lot of patience because they may find something in the next 5 minutes, or it may be 5 weeks before the next cool thing appears. But it's pretty amazing when it happens. If you think you've ever seen Nerds Excited, wait until you see what happens when archaeologists discover something carved in the shape of a human.
And this was a big structure, situated close to the top of the hill, higher up than the enormous building AD in the...
See, look at this. It's so cool. I don't get how the humans shouldn't be allowed to name things. We are bad at it. But like this enormous oval, it's ridiculous. I mean, a lot of us have houses bigger than that now. I'm not entirely sure the house I'm in right now is bigger than that, but houses are often bigger than that. But considering this is a Neolithic structure built by stacking stones and pillars and shit, and we can see several of the other structures of a much more manageable size, it's a huge building. But also, this large communal area, shall we say, is attached to this, well, all three of these structures are kind of attached together. I'm not sure what the hell AC would be, but maybe it's the side. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with these sites, which is one of the reasons we're covering them, because I want to learn things too. But this AB area is like almost like a separate room more than a separate building, where they had a whole bunch of carved stuff. So it's like this is the gathering area, and this is where they kept the idols, almost like in terms of the Israelites, the Holy of Holies. Like only the 4 special people ever get to go in there, and perhaps carvings, my goodness, carvings, idols, and so forth would get brought out and displayed to the crowd for celebrations, religions. Is there really a difference at this point?
Bizarre pillared enclosure AB. And from this location at the top of the hill, there are some truly commanding views of the local landscape.
Jason Jacoby says, I want to build the tepe. And that's sort of a compelling thing too, because this is like an upscaled version of what a lot of us do when we're small kids, right? We're stacking up rocks. Maybe we're even carving some animal figures out of stuff for our little like this is what humans are drawn to do, but we can only do so much by ourselves, especially as children when we're small and weak and have to come in for dinner and wash your hands first and you know, those sorts of things. But if we had like a whole group of people whose food needs were met, maybe they'd do something like this. If we work together for years or seasons or across generations, even like our generation might build this big oval room, and then the next generation might build, you know, the room attached to it with the idols and whatnot, and the next generation will build the library or the theater or something. And like, to just keep stacking up rocks like this, I don't know, it seems like the fulfillment of human destiny. We do it almost instinctively. To do it as a society, it seems almost heavenly. Maybe that's why people think of the heavens as being on top of mountains, because while the tepes aren't on top of the mountains, they are in highlands. So there's that, I guess. I'm speculating, but it's a fun speculation.
The building in question is the one that contains the amazing 2.3 meter tall human statue.
Now, look at this thing. Look at this thing. Now, there are some of the things are in better shape than others, obviously, but this carving, it's obviously human shaped, but there's some features of the damn thing that are really fascinating. For one thing, it has like not just the suggestion of features, but features, right? Like it's got eyelids as well as eye spaces. There's some definition to the nose. There's something of a mouth. There's a suggestion of a beard. There's limitations to what they could do with the stone, and it's also very old. And the next two pillars next to it are very decayed. Like this thing is obviously cracked in a couple of places, but there's ribs. There's reproductive organs, shall we say. There's legs. Like someone went to a great deal of trouble to make this as accurate as possible, given the materials available at the time. Because remember, Neolithic era, we're using stone, like just stone. There's no metal tools available. There's harder stones, you know?
And it was first announced to the world's media in 2023. It also contained the statue of a vulture, a selection of
Now, we don't actually know that's a vulture, because a lot of these, they're very stylized, you know, like you can see slightly behind it, there's something that's presumed to be a snake because it's coily. Could be a snake. But this vulture, it doesn't look much like a vulture. There are vultures in the region today, but this looks kind of like a toucan. Now, what a thing looks like and what it's supposed to be aren't necessarily the same. We get that in art today as well. There's things represented as other things because the things they aren't easy to draw. Medieval art also notoriously bad at representing things artistically. But is it a vulture? I'm sus. What I'm less sus of is why, because Weedbro, who also became a member, actually upgraded to Cinder. Look at that. Hooray. So there are multiple levels of membership. We've already mentioned Match, where you get all the custom emojis, and you do get all the custom emojis at the higher levels. But you also get access to a ton of member-exclusive content, and I mean a ton. There's a lot of members-only videos. I do at least one members-only live stream a month, more when I can. I think last month I managed 2, but I try to do at least 1. And, among other things, your name in the credits. And today, we're debuting the new credits for January. So if you want your name in the credits for next month, that's a thing you can do. You could also support over at Patreon, patreon.com/betterthanember. Patrons and Cinder level members get their names in the credits at the end of the shows. And thank you so much. That helps a lot. I very much appreciate it. Where'd it go? There we go. Communist number 09182 says the ribs. Ribs. I know, the ribs from the statue carving we were just looking at. Deviant says, vultures are native to Turkey. Toucans, not so much. Yes, I know. But I mean, we don't know. It's not a bird that got hunted to extinction. Like the passenger pigeon here in the United States, right? Like, even today, it's only been 100 years or so since they went extinct. And there are people who think they were a myth. But they were just like super easy to hunt to extinction. So humans did, because sometimes humans suck that way. Ugh.
Stone plates and vessels, a porthole stone, fallen T-pillars and more. Whilst viewing the building half excavated in 2024, I knew that I was seeing something very special being uncovered, and I couldn't wait to see it again on my visit in 2025, to see just how much of this new building was now exposed. In 2024, using the pictures I'd taken at the site and also Google Earth, I made a video that speculated.
Sapphire's figured it out. We're all wrong because birds are fake. It's true. It is known. It is known. So clearly that's, an alien spy robot or the Atlanteans, because remember, we're talking 11,000 years ago, right? So according to Plato, Atlantis sank 12,000 years ago. So it's only like 1,000-year difference. And there may be remnants of the Atlanteans running around who still have their technology, like birds and things or something. I don't know. I'm spitballing.
The building was 15 to 20 meters in diameter. It also seemed clear to me that this was another communal special purpose building and not some kind of domestic structure.
Now that's a thing. I realize that there's a lot of what entices people about these things is the imagination they invoke. What is this thing? What does it mean? But the speculation, when not clearly identified as such, can be somewhat misleading. Like, it seemed clear to me that this was a communal structure and not a domestic dwelling. Oof. Yes, as Jinx points out, he really uses odd influence. He does. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but he is not a good reader of things. But whatever. It's not an AI, so credit there, We've got an episode on AI nonsense coming up. I think Monday after this, so Ox Monday, if you will. But I digress. There's the speculation is intriguing, and I like to share the speculation too because it helps get people excited about what we do know and what conclusions we can draw. But it has to be clearly identified as speculation. You can't be like, it seems to me that it's a communal building, because we don't know, just because it looks like a maple leaf doesn't mean that's what it is, right?
2024, I took a close look at this structure, described it, and offered my own basic interpretation, because at the time, there was next to no information being released officially. A year went by and still nothing official had been released on this incredible excavation, and so when I returned to Karahan Tepe in October 2024...
So there's a couple of different factors. This would be a good point to hop over to an older National Geographic article from 2016, talking about the world's oldest temple to be restored, right? Because most of us have only heard about Göbekli Tepe and the other tepes in the last couple of years. And that's because they've only really been getting attention in the last couple of years. 10 years ago, it was very little known. It was like an article in National Geographic kind of thing. We're going to get into this. We're going to learn a little bit about why this is the state of where we are now in just a moment after this quick hydration break, where I turn down my heater and things. We'll be right back. Hey folks, I've been working hard on my health, and so far I've lost over 140 pounds. A huge part of good health is hydration. That's why I'm thrilled to partner with Epic Water Filters. Check this out. Not only can you say goodbye to expensive bottled water, but these filters are made in the US, so no tariffs, and they're made to fit your life. From these lovely pitchers I can fill from, to sink units, to portable filters that fit in your reusable bottle. With Epic, I can refill from nature's water sources and not have to worry about bacteria and whatnot. But also, send back a used filter to be responsibly recycled, and they'll send you a free replacement, saving you and the earth even more. Want to save a ton of money, be healthier, and build a better world? Head to epicwaterfilters.com and enter code EMBER15 at checkout for 15% off. Don't settle for random water. Upgrade to Epic. All right. Hopefully we're all upgraded and hydrated and things. And I mean, this is an arid part of Turkey. It's super important to stay hydrated. And that's going to lead into something interesting about what we've been discovering at Karahan Tepe. But later. First thing first. So again, this is an article from 10 years ago, January 20th, 2016. It's literally 10 years and a couple of days. Oh, damn it. It's January 30th. All right, we're not talking about that. We've got shit to do. The world's oldest monument may soon get an image makeover. Now, of course, journalism. We don't know it's the oldest monument. We still don't know. We don't even know it's a monument. And there's almost certainly older stuff still. But it's pretty fucking old. It's the oldest shit we found so far. A new project will promote and preserve Göbekli Tepe, home to the most ancient temple structures ever discovered so far. Turkey hopes to eventually boost tourism at the site, which they have now successfully started to do, but it's only at the very beginnings. It's complicated. We'll get into it. Which in a region where tourism has declined because of the nearby Syrian conflict and refugee crisis. This is another trend I don't like in journalism is when we're reporting on old stuff or science stuff, some journalists like to try to tie it to current events. If it's not a current events article, you shouldn't be throwing current events in it because, looking at this 10 years in the future, the thing with ISIS isn't relevant, it's just cluttering up an unrelated article. Or if you're looking for information on what happened with ISIS, then an oblique reference in an article about an ancient historical site isn't going to trip the radar, So it's not helpful for either journalistic purpose to do that. So I realize, the journalists of the world are not waiting on my every word, but don't do that, Since excavation began in 1995, yes, we've been at it for 31 years, the site at southeastern Turkey has changed the way archaeologists think about the origins of civilization. Its circular structures with their elaborately carved stones and distinctive T-shaped pillars are more than 12,000 years old, older than the invention of agriculture or even pottery. Now, I do rightly have to make a note. What we call agriculture, it's sort of like what we call life. We drew a line and said, these criteria make the thing. Having some of those criteria, but not all of them, then it isn't the thing. It's a philosophy sort of deal. It's a X or not X situation. We did have proto-agriculture for a very long time, right? Like our hunter-gatherers followed herds. They migrated to follow. That's similar to later agricultural practices. It makes sense to do it. It's a no-brainer. You don't have to reason it out. You don't have to invent it. But it does relate to later agricultural practices that developed from it. Similar thing with the gathering part. We learned pretty early on that if you find something growing in a certain area, that thing will continue to grow in that area. So if you want to grow more of that thing, plant it in that area. You don't have to learn about irrigation and whatnot. If a thing already grows under certain conditions, plant it in the same conditions and it will grow again, So there's pluses and minuses to this. It seems likely that a lot of ancient cultures did practice things that we might call agriculture today, but don't meet the technical definition of formal agriculture, in part because they're in the wrong part of history. Like if we find writing on a pillar in Göbekli Tepe, for example, it won't be accepted as writing because it's from a time before there was writing. That's circular reasoning, but there will be a lot of pushback on finding older writing than the oldest writing because it's before there was writing. We ran into this problem in astronomy and cosmology over the course of the last century. We originally believed, after the Big Bang was broadly accepted by the scientific consensus, that the universe was maybe 4 billion years old. And then we found rocks on Earth that show the Earth is older than 4 billion years old. And we can't have the Earth being older than the universe, so we had to push the age of the universe back. We had to revise our estimates. And then we found stars in other galaxies that showed the universe had to be, more than 8 billion years old. And then we'd find a star that was 10 billion years old. Well, we can't have a star being older than the whole universe, so we had to revise the age of the universe again. And it moved several times over the course of the 20th century because we kept finding things that were older than the universe. Clearly, our model is wrong. But every time we run into an example like that, no matter the science, every single time there's pushback. There's people who say, well, the model says this thing only happened at this time in history. And so the thing we're looking at can't be that. That's a reification fallacy. That's confusing the map for the place. It's saying the model is real and reality isn't. No, when there's a conflict between the model and reality, reality always wins. It means your model is wrong and needs to be adjusted. But we always have that fight. It drives me nuts, but it's also kind of important, I have to admit, because we can't just accept any random thing a person finds anomalously as upsetting our entire model. If we find a 10 billion year old star in an 8 billion year old universe, we have to consider the possibility that our measurement of the star's age is incorrect rather than the whole model of the universe. So we have to push back and evaluate the evidence supporting the claim, as well as how that evidence conflicts with the existing model. And we have to do the same thing with agriculture, with writing, with all the other things. We have to make sure the evidence really does overturn the model before we start breaking down our models. But I digress. As I said before, people do come here for the tangents. It is known. All right, continuing on. Since excavations began in 1995, didn't we say that already? Maybe we said that already. Right, agriculture down here. Okay, moving on. I would be a fun professor, wouldn't I? I just randomly, hey, where the hell were we? The earliest dates, incidentally, narrator of a video we've been watching, that's how you read things, is you put some life into what you're saying. But again, I digress. The earliest dates have upended the idea that agriculture led to civilization. And that is a super important thing, right? Like, we know there had to be something like agriculture to support this hunter-gatherer people as they built fucking settlements, big old stone buildings and whatnot. They had to get their food from somewhere. So there had to be some stability of food. But definitionally, they're pre-agricultural. So how did they do that exactly? Well, there are some thoughts. There's some possibilities. One is that they were hunter-gatherers, but they got good at it, and they would sometimes have surpluses. So after a while, carrying around your surpluses starts to be a bit of a pain in the ass. So maybe you stack up some rocks and you make like a basic warehouse. So you swing by this site every few months to drop off more surplus at the warehouse, so you don't have to carry it around all the time. And then when times are lighter, you go back to the warehouse and grab some of the supplies you've stored. And then as time goes by, maybe you add another building for a different kind of food, or to hold overflow from your warehouse, or possibly to just have a place to be warm during the colder times. And then maybe you build another building for another function. And over many, many, many years, you end up with a whole shit ton of buildings. That's just one possibility. That is speculation, but it's quite possible. Scholars long thought that when hunter-gatherers settled down and started growing crops, the resulting food surplus made it possible for people to organize into complex societies. Göbekli Tepe calls that conventional wisdom into question. Klaus Schmidt, I can't even say German words now. What is happening to me? Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist who led excavations at the site, argued before he died in 2014 that it might have worked the other way around. The vast labor force needed to build the enclosures pushed people to develop agriculture as a way of providing predictable food and perhaps drink for workers. And that is an interesting hypothesis, because it, depending on the forces and at play, are they economic forces? Are they political forces? Are they religious forces? Are they cultural forces? Whatever the case may be. I mean, you could make a case for it coming out of ancestor worship. We need a burial ground for our ancestors so we can have proper funeral services. And then we can come back and honor our ancestors. And so they start building tribute things to their ancestors, like the equivalent of a church on the edge of a graveyard kind of deal. Now, we don't know that's the case at all, but it's one possibility. But as it becomes more of a cultural necessity to participate in the building of these structures, the necessity gives rise to an opportunity, not necessarily an inevitability, but a likelihood that someone will figure out something that will make life easier for everybody. And it's possible they figured out growing crops on purpose would do the trick. Now, if that's the case, it could push the dawn of agriculture back a little bit further than we thought. Not that much, though. We generally peg the agricultural revolution as beginning around 12,000 years ago. So we're already kind of in the envelope. But it is interesting. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, which a lot of people have been hearing about recently, but this is from, 10 years ago. Turkey's Dogus Group will announce Wednesday, back then, that they plan to spend 15 million US equivalent dollars over the next 20 years, which means we're halfway through, in partnership with the National Geographic Society. Quote, Göbekli Tepe is our 0 point in time. Dogus Group Chairman Ferit F. I can't pronounce things. My apologies, folks. Said in a press release. Could it have been a religious site? Now, here's the thing. We don't actually know. There's a lot of presumption that these big communal areas were temples, but we don't know. It's all speculation based on things we're familiar with from the present in distant antiquity. But for all we can tell, they were theaters because everyone was an art nerd, and every night they gathered to put on a performance of the Paleolithic version of Little Orphan Annie. We don't know. And that's very intriguing. It's really compelling, at least in my opinion. But I'm a nerd and I'm fascinated by curious things. Mine of Finished Sock says, don't peg the dawn of agriculture. Like and share the stream instead. I mean, if you and the dawn of agriculture are into it, I'm not going to stand between your blooming romance, but also like and share the stream instead. In fact, sharing makes a big difference, a bigger difference than you might think. I've mentioned before, but I don't know if I've done it on this stream, that I'm trying really hard to grow the channel this year. There's a specific reason. I want to get the channel to 10,000 subscribers because I want to do a proper fundraiser. Or specifically, I want to be able to do proper fundraisers. We already have a couple of fundraisers going. For example, we have different page, this shirt. All sales of this shirt, the proceeds anyway, the manufacturing costs I don't control, but the proceeds go to support the Trevor project. That's helpful. It's wonderful we can do that. And you can find that and all the rest of the merch on betterthanember.com under the store tab. Or some of it is available underneath this very video, probably. But I digress. I want to be able to do proper fundraisers rather than sell merch and some of the money goes to support the charity. And YouTube hides the button that lets me do that. behind the 10,000 subscriber line. Much the same way the ability to forward a stream, to raid another channel when I wrap up, is hidden behind the 1,000 subscriber line. So I need to get to 10,000 subscribers. And while I very, very much appreciate every one of you who subscribes and helps us do that, we need to reach more people because the algorithm is sure as hell not going to show us to anybody else. So the only way to get this kind of content in front of other people is that share button. So hit it early, often, put it everywhere you can think of. I very, very much appreciate it. Because while only a small percentage of people are going to subscribe to a channel with an borderline communist, anarchist, socialist, whatever the hell you want to call it, leftward, atheist, trans woman running things, I feel like what we're doing here matters despite the identity of the presenter. Sometimes because of it. And it's not just me. We do have wonderful people over here from time to time. For example, Lil of all trades, who knows physics and history and a bunch of other stuff. Kelly King, who's a community organizer for the Black Non-Believers of Detroit. And sometimes a bunch of other wonderful ladies drop by. And yesterday we even had a man. We had Dr. Kip Davis. So when I can get them, I have some interesting people over. So I thank you for trying to help. It's very much appreciated. I know it's a big goal, but I also know it's possible to get there this year, especially if people help. So I appreciate you. Hi, Patchy says, new drinking game. Every time Ember says, I digress, we have to down a shot. Oh my God, I would kill my audience. Don't do that. I don't want y'all to die. Oh, wowzers. Okay, where the hell were we? Newly gathered evidence from the excavations at the site backs up Schmidt's argument that the beginnings of civilization spurred the invention of farming. Maybe. In the middle of each monumental enclosure, two tall T-shaped pillars. Now, this is a thing that shows we're years and years and years ago. It's not true that in the middle of each enclosure are two tall T-shaped pillars. There are T-shaped pillars in a lot of enclosures, but they're not in the middle of most of them. So, yeah. They're sometimes carved with stylized arms, hands, loincloths. The largest weighs more than 16 tons. You know, you load 16 tons, and what do you get? It's a song. Old people will get it. Carving and moving them from a nearby quarry must have been a tremendous challenge. That's assuming they were carved and moved from a nearby quarry and not carved that way out of local stone. Knowing that these people had the ability to carve directly out of the local bedrock, we don't know they're from a quarry. Maybe they are. To my knowledge, we haven't found the quarry, though. But if they were moved from a nearby quarry, it would require hundreds of people and food enough to feed them all. Well, we don't know that either. We're jumping to conclusions about how the things may have been moved. We know from the megaliths on Easter Island, for example, that you can move giant structures with surprisingly few people if you're clever about it. But archaeologists have yet to find evidence of permanent settlement at Göbekli Tepe. One recent suggestion is that the site was a regional gathering place, perhaps a trade hub, a prelude to full-on agriculture, as people brought what they had to trade with others who had different things. And that seems like a likely possibility as well, because in a pre-agricultural society, before proper formal agriculture caught on, you're still going to have some kind of economics. You're still going to have some kind of trade network, because some people are going to be really good at hunting deer, and other people are going to be really good at hunting vultures, and other people are going to be really good at finding certain roots and things, and all sorts of other options. And even if you're good at everything, one day you're going to get lucky with one thing and not with another. And so you come to town to trade, so you can have a balanced diet, if nothing else. Archaeologists have yet to, right, we said that already. Regional gathering place. Yes, it's perched on top of a bone dry peak. Now, to be clear, it's dry today, which is one of the reasons it's important to have your Epic water filters. Go to epicwaterfilters.com, enter code EMBER15 at checkout for 15% off. You know, water, it's precious. It's necessary for survival. But having good water is super important, especially in a society that doesn't even have metal, let alone antibiotics. So with these water filters, the water you get is so pure. It's holy. It's not the nasty bacteria soup you get in churches. That stuff will this will wash away your sins. So get saved and save the planet at epicwaterfilters.com. Code EMBER15. I enjoy my bonus commercial. I try to have fun with them. I'm constantly trying to make them funnier, but we work with what we've got. Say lovey. All right. Deviant says, Soot, you make me feel like a teenager again. Oh my. So today it's on top of a bone dry peak, but that isn't necessarily what the climate was like thousands of years ago. After all, we know from other ancient archaeological sites that people tend to settle where there's water, right? People tend to build along rivers or along coastlines. So the fact that it's in arid highlands is itself a little bit unusual, but also they may not have been arid at the time. Like, we know that much of what's now the Sahara was savanna when Egypt was setting up shop, for instance. Climates change over thousands and thousands of years. Absolutely they do. But it does have a commanding view of the surrounding mountains and plains to the south. And that's another interesting possibility, is, are they there? Why there? Why in the highlands? Possibly because the lowlands are prone to flooding. There are a lot of flood myths coming out of that Mesopotamian region, aren't there? But possibly for other reasons. Possibly because there were so many fucking invading armies all the time. The Persians and the Babylonians and the Akkadians and so forth. And that's still true today. When this article was written, ISIS was moving on villages in Syria. There's constantly war in the lowlands and has been for thousands and thousands of years. Maybe that was the case back then too. If you're going to build a sacred building, maybe build it away from the war zones. Perhaps. It's a possibility. We're speculating. But it kind of goes to show there is so much that we don't know that it could be. And it really gets the brain fired up, at least in my opinion. Hopefully you agree as well. Quote, but then people would have to meet regularly to keep the gene pool fresh and exchange information. Now, of course, they wouldn't know any of those things, right? Like, they don't know they have to exchange information. They just did it because it was advantageous. They don't know they have to keep the gene pool fresh. Again, going back to the ancient myths of those areas, apparently they very much did not know that you probably shouldn't keep things in the family. But clans that did exchange genetic information tended to do better long term. So there was an evolutionary selection pressure in that regard. C'est la vie. But that's what this Jens Notroff, a German Archaeological Institute archaeologist who works at the site, said. Quote, it's a landmark. It's no accident they go there. Now, yes, it's a landmark. But is it a landmark because the site is there, or is the site there because it's a landmark? It's a Euthyphro's dilemma of archaeology, isn't it? Because I dare say, if you start telling people you want to go to New York City, you're thinking of the fact the city is there and not the fact the harbor is there, which is why they built the city there. You know? In fact, it's smaller versions of the pillars, symbols, and architecture carved into stone at Göbekli Tepe that have been found in settlements up to 125 miles away. Now, again, this is from years ago. We found a few more sites since then. It's as though Göbekli Tepe were a cathedral and the others are local churches. Now, this This is blatant speculation, although more than one archaeologist has speculated this, but it is speculation. It's like saying there's Rome and there's cathedrals, but it's another one of those instances of people in the present projecting what we know about what we do today onto people of the past. We don't know there was any centralized religion at all. Perhaps it was ancestor worship. Perhaps it was animism. Perhaps it was general spiritualism. Perhaps it was a broad and all-inclusive polytheism like the ancient Greeks did, where if a new person showed up talking about a different god they never heard of, they went, sure, why not? The more gods, the merrier, or something. We don't know. Hunter-gatherers might have traveled long distances to meet, to worship, and to help build new monumental structures, sponsoring feasts to display their wealth. And that's an interesting concept. We don't think of hunter-gatherers as possessing wealth, but it's almost certain. We see it in the I want to say migratory, but that's the wrong word. The traveling tribes of the Bedouin areas, right? Like the sheiks and the shahs and all that sorts of stuff. Even though they're technically hunter-gatherers, they're technically wanderers who don't have a permanent settlement, they still have the equivalent of a chieftain or an overlord or something along those lines who still controls things, promises protection for the other people in the clan, and accrues vast amounts of wealth. And just like throughout all of human history, the people with a shit ton of wealth want to show it off, partly to build more wealth and power, and partly to show the other powerful people how powerful they are. So they'll be afraid, or they'll treat them with respect, or they'll just leave them the fuck alone and not try to conquer their people. Whatever the reason, this is a thing that's been part of human civilization longer than we've technically had civilization. We do get people accruing wealth and do try to show off that wealth and power in whatever way they can think of. Often, as we saw in Egypt, it involves stacking up lots of rocks. Quote, the feasting aspect is easiest, the live broadcasting, folks. It's an adventure. The feasting aspect is the easiest explanation for attracting a labor force to construct the enclosures, Notroff says. But the fact the thing is an easy explanation doesn't make it correct, right? That's it. I realize I'm enjoying speculation as much as the next girl, but you have to point out it's speculation. You can't say this is an easy explanation, therefore it's the best, therefore it's true. That's not how anything works. Holy crow. And I realize I've been going for a while here, but I do have a brief video to highlight the inevitable results of what happens if we just let people declare shit. Check this out.
I have a problem with this stuff being normalized across the spectrum, and specifically, like, why push this on kids? Why introduce this to kids?
I am a depraved wretch. I am a great sinner. I'm a worm, completely undeserving of any love or any grace. I'm nothing. I'm nothing.
You're incapable of being a good person. You're an evil person. You're a terrible person. At the core fabric of who you are. That's why we need laws. We need laws because we're bad people. All of us are bad people.
You can't spell Pride Month without demon. PRIDEMONTH.
If we don't know who the women are, because they are just people, then we won't be able to pull the women up to equality with men.
We have to try to limit the harm. And that means reducing or keeping down the number of people who transition. And that's for two reasons. One of them is that every one of those people is a person who's been damaged. But the second one is every one of those people is basically, a huge problem to a sane world.
Transgenderism must be eradicated.
The LGBT, transgender, grooming our children's minds is a national security threat. We need to hold people for treason, start having some public hearings, and start executing people.
I will use whatever gives me victory. I don't care about the truth, and I don't care about the law. I care about one thing, the control.
But then they rigged the election, and now we won, so I'm going to be your president. Then what happened is they rigged the election, and I became president, so that was a good thing.
I agreed with many things you said during, in fact, probably more than most other candidates when you were running for president, but I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian.
I just want to say I feel good about the Republican Party. I feel good about where we're going as a nation. We're killing all the right people and we're cutting your taxes.
It was actually a tremendous blessing to these children for them to be killed and go to heaven and be with God.
We've been hoodwinked. We've been taken in by an ideology crafted by creeps and then pushed on children.
Stop letting people pressure you into thinking.
If they die, they die.
I want to be ignorant, honestly.
Being a Christian doesn't exclude us from experiencing spiritual dryness.
We're bad people. All of us are bad people.
And if you're experiencing spiritual dryness, well, you know what to do. Head over to epicwaterfilters.com, enter code Ember15 at checkout for 15% off. Oh, goodness. If you, like me, are a dirty slut for water, be a responsible hydro hoe and use protection. I'm easily amused, as I'm sure you've noticed by now. All right, back to our update on the sites for 2025.
I didn't know if work had progressed any further. Well, to my surprise, the building was now entirely excavated. You could see the full shape of the building, the limestone pillars around the perimeter, the rubble-built walls, and the two now fallen.
Now, it's really, really interesting that on the low end of the building, now again, the shape of the land may have been different in the distant past, because we do see, like, there's a cemetery near me, for example, where there's graves from World War I, and they have like their own special section, right? And there's a photo of the graves after the dedication ceremony and things. And there's two roads moving along roads, but in a graveyard sense, like big enough for a hearse kind of thing. But there's two roads along the section going in different directions. It's been 100 years-ish. One road is no longer there, and it's completely overgrown with trees, but the shape of the land itself has changed. Like what used to be a relatively flat section is now a hill, and the other road now goes uphill, and then there's a sharp drop off where it was just flat. Like the shape of the land changed over just 100 years. And this is in a cemetery where there's not a whole lot of activity most of the time, you know? That's the whole point of a cemetery, is it's very peaceful. So we can imagine that a hilltop in the wilderness, over thousands of years, it could have been different. We don't know. We can't just assume that the general outside shape of the land is the same now as it was then. But that said, the low end of the structure has only that short wall, but the high end of the structure not only has a higher wall, but tiers to it. Was this seating area? Was this gathering area? Was it more space, like a similar thing to an amphitheater or a stage effect where people could see over other people because there were too many people? It's a compelling thought.
Large T-shaped pillars in the middle of the building. It truly was a special building in every sense, and at the end of November 2025, finally, some details and new pictures of the building have been released to the world's media.
It's neat that there's a newspaper called Archeo News. What is it? The future is the product of the past. That's an interesting tagline, because it's kind of true, right? Like everything we do is somewhat evolutionary in nature, because what is the result of what was, and what will be is the result of what is. Like we never see new things just appear. Everything is an adaptation of what already existed. Like humans don't make rocks. I mean, we can make concrete and whatnot, but we stack up existing rocks, right? It's interesting. It's a fun concept.
The estimation for the size of the building was correct. It's 17 meters in diameter, but it turns out that this building is actually quite unique, being different.
It is in quite a few fascinating ways, which he may or may not mention, but I want to scroll back just a tiny bit. This is compacted dirt to make a nice, relatively even floor. That may be a result of excavation, right? Because they excavate in layers. But this over here, this step down, that seems to be hard rock. Like they found bedrock and they stacked up rocks to even it out, to make everything the same level. But there's also ledging material, right? Like there isn't just these vertical pillars, which are impressive enough, but there's rocks, large rocks put on top of these rock piles to create a semi-smooth surface. And that's fascinating too, because it's more than just architectural at this point. It's ergonomical. And that's a little different. That's a different stage of development, you know?
Being different to every other building discovered so far from the pre-pottery Neolithic.
You can really see a distinction here. This, of course, is one of the T-pillars that is toppled and broken, and they haven't yet moved it. Instead, they've excavated all around it, but not under it. So you can see what the dirt that it fell on top of, where the dirt was at the time it fell, and how hard it continues to be after all these years.
This large oval building actually resembles an amphitheater, meaning it's the first communal building to have tiered benches. There's apparently...
Now, we don't know that there were benches, but there's room for benches, unless you want to call these ledges benches, and maybe they were. We don't know, you know? But there is ergonomics here, which is fascinating.
3 tiers in total, with the main focus being this area where we find the seated human statue.
Now, this is really, really cool, because this is the same area where there's that big human statue with the reproductive organ. We don't know if it was a symmetrical design. If it were, there would have been another human statue somewhere where that ladder is. Pieces are going to be missing. We can't help that. But if it were symmetrical, then it might, speculating here, but it might stand to reason that since this figure is very, very male, the other figure may have been very, very female, if there were another figure. But also, we've got this wheel-looking thing here in the center. They're calling it a seated human statue. Maybe it's something of a throne. Maybe it's something of an apotheosed ancestor, or the representation of all ancestors, because it seems to be that many, if not all, mythologies that involve gods are either apotheosed ancestors, the leader, the founder of the clan, if you will, or they're a stand-in for the collective concept of all ancestors. As we've discussed before, the Mosaic laws make a lot more sense if you substitute the Lord for the ancestors. The collective ancestors say thus and such.
And the vulture that's now inside Llanlertha Museum. Inside this building, we find carved heads embedded in the wall.
This is another interesting one. Now, this style of carving a human-ish face, obviously, it only makes sense in terms of pareidolia. If a person who has face blindness looked at this, it's just an elevated T that's... Obviously, it's not a T because it predates that alphabet, but it has a T shape to it. It's a Tetris piece, you might say, but it's thicker towards the bottom. Why is that? So it's only our pareidolia that lets us see that it's supposed to be a human face, but it seems likely that ancient humans had pareidolia to the same degree and for the same reason we do today. But also, artistic styles can serve as a kind of cultural haplogroup map. We can see when certain artistic traditions developed and how they spread, or we can find artistic traditions in different areas and trace them back through time to a general time and place where they originated and then seemed to spread through trade and education and negotiation and simple migration. It's fascinating, and it lets you trace the interplay of cultures in the same way tracing back the genotypes does through the haplogroups, in the same way tracing back the history of the languages does. They all come back to common ancestors, and those go back to other common ancestors, and those go back to other common ancestors. And it's really fascinating because you can see where different innovations are. Deviant says, no, it has a mouth, Ember. It has the suggestion of a mouth. But I will grant you that there's something that looks like a line that could be a mouth there. Or a mustache. Probably a mouth.
Walls, human and animal sculptures, stone vessels, limestone pillars, and more.
That's another one. Stone vessels. This is a thing we've known about almost as long as we've known about the site. The most famous thing about these places are the T-pillars. But there's also jars. They don't have pottery. How are there jars? Well, we know they used jars for various things, possibly brewing ancient beer, possibly storing water. After all, the headwaters of the Euphrates aren't that far off. It'd be a hell of a chore to bring a big old stone jug that carries 40 gallons or something all the way down there, fill it up, and then drag its heavy ass all the way back up. But you could do it. But maybe they had a more local water source. Whatever the case may be, what the jugs were for seems obvious, but how did they get them? Because there's a bit of a difference between carving faces onto stones where there's protuberances and things, and carving out a rock to make a hollow jug. It's fascinating stuff.
Clearly an important building, and thankfully, the experts are now cautious about calling the oval buildings of Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe temples.
And that seems wise, because while our first inclination might be to call them temples, because there's the amphitheater structure, the way they're set up, the fact they're so big, and the fact that so many ancient civilizations seem to put the sacred rites of religion or proto-religion at the center of their societies, does not mean that's the case here. In fact, these sites are so old it could predate all of that. So it's just speculation that that's what those are. And that doesn't mean it's true or even likely. And this is one of the reasons we have to put critical thinking at the forefront of all things. Because as I've always said since the beginning of this channel, when we were mostly doing counter apologetics and space science here, when you pretend to have the answers, you stop looking for the real answers. If you just wave your hand and say it's probably a temple, you're missing the possibilities of what else it might be, which could very well include the real answer. Oh, what have I done? Apparently, you can open descriptions on full screen when you click on, I learned a new trick today. Hooray.
Simple interpretation doesn't give the ancient people justice, because, truth be told, we have absolutely no idea how these buildings were used. Instead of being called...
Sapphire raises an interesting solution. Just fill a bunch of skins and pour them in. That probably would be easier, yes. Considerably easier. See, this is why we need civilizations, because I might find a big old stone jug that's mostly carved out by water or something, and I spend some time chipping away to make the opening larger and manage to not crack the whole damn thing. And so now we have a jug, and I want to carry the whole damn jug down to the river. And Sapphire's like, Ember, you dumbass. Let's just use skins. Let's just fill skins. We can make multiple trips if we have to, whatever.
Temples. They are now called communal or special purpose buildings, places where an organized group gathered.
Now, this is, Obviously, this is an artist's impression of what things may have looked like, and some of the big pillars do have carvings on them. But again, we don't know. There's nothing left of what may have been roofs. They might have looked like this, but we don't know.
What they did inside went together, of course, we don't know. But rites and rituals, social organisation, meetings, feasts, and so on could have all taken place. Settlement at Karahan Tepe began around 9.
Now, again, Karahan Tepe seems to be a secondary site of Göbekli Tepe, although the big-ass fucking amphitheater is really cool. But I do want to call attention to the fact that this is just what's excavated so far. This is not the total extent of the site. Again, we're doing excavations in a grid pattern. This is just how far we've gotten so far. At Göbekli Tepe, it's even more severe, I suppose, because we found the top parts of those T-pillars quite far away from the area that's already excavated, indicating there may be outbuildings or there may be continuous structures all the way through that whole area. We don't know yet, because excavation takes time, especially if you want to do it slowly enough, you don't ruin everything that you're digging up.
9400 BC, about the same time as Göbekli Tepe, and it continued for around 1400 years. And that really is an enormous amount of time.
That really is an enormous amount of time. Now, some of our oldest cities today are older than that. But again, we're talking about the dawn of prehistory in the Neolithic. Now, certain spaces where it makes sense to have a city are always going to have a city there, like Rome, for example. Or I'm trying to think of like a city in the Levant area, but Babylon, where there's the meeting of the two rivers. There's certain places where even if a city gets completely demolished, the next group of people to come through is going to build a city there. But this is on what today at least is an arid hilltop in the middle of fucking nowhere. To be continuously inhabited for 1400 years is pretty impressive. It makes us wonder why they picked that spot, but also why they left. What happened, and what happened in that intervening time frame that effectively a city existed when there should not have been cities.
And no doubt the settlement changed a lot from the beginnings to the end. The people would have changed as well. Their views, beliefs, activities, and so on. A lot can change with any settlement in 1400 years.
And that's very true. We see that in the present as well as throughout all of history. Like just a few hundred years ago, Europeans had very different ideas about what constituted a human. For instance, just a few hundred years ago, the United States didn't exist. Half of the countries in Europe didn't exist, at least not in their current forms. Peoples and cultures and languages and religions change. 2,000 years ago, there was no Christianity. 1,400 years ago, there was no Islam. That's half of humanity between the two of them. Things change a lot over several centuries.
Archaeologists have already identified 3 distinct phases of architectural development. Firstly, there were the oval or round plan structures, then rectangular structures but with rounded corners, and then the fully rectangular or true cornered buildings.
Now, this is fascinating as well because, the round structures we've seen are mostly piled up rocks. The more oval structures let you do a bit more with the architecture, but the true corners require not only precision masonry, but precision cutting, as we saw a little bit with that first building.
Just like Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe has a blend of domestic and communal buildings. Both sites always were settlements, from the times they were founded right up to the end.
Like we can see several of these other buildings. uses for the rooms, the actual professional archaeologists will doubtless have a better understanding than I do, but we can see that some of them have stone vessels that have an opening, a depression. Possibly they're wash basins, possibly they're for water storage. This other building has something that looks very much like it's set up to be an oven, possibly a kiln, possibly for cooking. We don't know, but we can see that these are purpose-driven structures. Each one has an intention in mind. There's a certain thing we can learn from agriculture. Rooms have a purpose to them, and that's suggested by the architecture. There's a certain grammar to the structure of things, and we can learn how the people lived based on how their dwellings are built. Now, our modern dwellings don't do well over long periods of time. There's a number of villages that were abandoned towards the beginning of the Second World War. So these abandoned villages are nearly 100 years old. In some cases, slightly more than 100 years old. There's one of them near me, just up the road. And I went to go have a look a couple of years ago. I don't have the video from it handy, but it's not that interesting. It's all gone. There's one building you can still find the footprint of. It used to be the school because the floor was made of bricks. There's still bricks there. That's it. Everything else, the houses are completely gone. I found one well because it was a shaft dug and then lined with cement. Our current buildings, they're wood and fiberglass and gypsum. None of it lasts. So we'd never be able to excavate one of our own dwellings and find out anything about how we lived because we live in a throwaway culture. None of this is intended to be permanent. It's consumerism. It's mass production. But if we did come across one of our dwellings somehow preserved in Pompeii, buried in ash kind of fashion, we could learn a lot. We would find, for example, that we have dedicated kitchens that sometimes are a meal area, but often are not. That we had dedicated sleeping areas separate from the communal space, but often there's also a communal space. And we'd figure out that we had indoor plumbing as opposed to having to use outhouses and trenches and who knows. There's a lot you can learn about a people from their dwelling, both the technology they had available and their civilizational priorities. It's very interesting.
And they give us rare, tangible evidence of how social organisation and symbolic expression evolved hand in hand during the Neolithic Revolution. We know from studying the two sister sites that as the pre-pottery Neolithic progressed, the main focus of the ancient symbolism evolved from animal figures to human representations, and is probably due to a
pluses and minuses. We found more animal figures older, but it isn't necessarily a progression from animal figures to human figures. Like we know from the various Venuses across all of time that one of the first things humans carve is other humans, often human females, but that's neither here nor there. It's not necessarily a progression from animals to humans, but also a lot of the carvings of the humans aren't like that first big statue we saw. They're just suggestions of a human-ish form or face, like the T face that we saw. We see these all over the Middle East in different forms, in different levels of sophistication, but that general T shape is almost ubiquitous. It doesn't necessarily, it's sort of like Cubism, right? Picasso's middle phase of art. It isn't an evolution so much as an ideation. It's taking something that you used to make more detailed and making it less detailed so it's faster and easier to get to the core idea of what you want to convey. Sort of.
changing lifestyle and a changing worldview. The settlement began when people were hunting and gathering to survive, but of course,
artist representation, obviously. I don't know that anybody thinks that's what the places really looked like.
Communal living leads to new ways to manage food. Over time,
and that's one of my personal hypotheses, is that they, as I mentioned towards the start of the show, they could have begun as, we need to build a warehouse to store our food.
it seems people were viewing themselves as central, as masters of animals, plants, and the land as they moved into a new Neolithic lifestyle. And this changed.
Now, that's a little bit of projection, editorialization as well. Like, we know there are ancient cultures who considered themselves masters of the universe, but a huge number of Aboriginal cultures that persist today see themselves as existing in something of a harmony with the earth. Because when humans get too uppity and try to be dominant of the earth, it tends to lead to disasters of various kinds. So there's an evolutionary selection pressure against that sort of thing normally. But people today tend to think that way, because whether they're religious or not, they grow up in cultures shaped by religions that say things like, you are given ownership and dominion over the whole earth. And so we think, oh, ancient people thought that. But that's a relatively new idea in terms of ancient people.
Change in lifestyle goes hand in hand with a change in architecture. And that brings us to the second incredible architectural find announced at Karahan.
I also want to point out another thing, because we're technically over time already, but I'm just still going for a little bit longer because I can. There's nothing especially scheduled after this. But I do want to keep this short enough it's rewatchable later. But I really, really want to point out the fact that there's so many different rooms, potentially different structures, and they all share walls. That's noteworthy, because when we talk about buildings today, we often talk about distinct walls. Even in cities where we build buildings right up against each other, they don't share a wall. There's a break between them, a double layer, so you can knock down a fire damaged building between two and not knock down the ones on the sides, because they don't share a wall, even if they're hard up against one another. That wasn't the case here. Buildings did share walls because nobody had thought of doing it differently, and it's a lot easier to build something with 4 walls if you already have 1 or 2 walls built. You just build the next 2, and so you end up with this sort of lopsided honeycomb structure we see in the middle of Karahan here, and it creates certain logistical difficulties. How do you move from one building to the next if it's all walls and walls and walls? There's no room for streets between. There's no room for doorways between or hallways between. And sometimes there are connecting rooms, like we see between the big amphitheater area and the temple icon room. I'm gesturing with my mouse and you can't even see what I'm doing. What are you doing, Ember? Sometimes there's openings between the buildings and ruins, and sometimes not. But this is why there's so much supposition that the entrances to these areas would be through the roofs. And we've seen other ancient civilizations do this. Cliff dwellers, for example, will sometimes, but not always, have the entrances into a dwelling or a room come from above, even though it technically opens you up to a risk of weather, assuming you don't have some way to close it, like draping a hide over your opening or something, because of the way the walls are built. You can afford structural weakness in the above space and not so much in the below space. And there's a second factor. If you're going to have fire inside your dwelling, having a hole in the roof for the smoke to get out, it only takes screwing that up a couple of times before you figure it out real damn quick. All right, let's go on a little bit further.
Tepe this season. A large rectangular building in the heart of the settlement. Now, to me, this building would not be out of place in ancient Greece.
And this brings us back to the first building. And you know, he's talking about how it might not be out of place in ancient Greece. Quite possibly. This looks a lot like a bathhouse. And the reason I wanted to get here was partly because it's so cool that it is carved directly into the bedrock, and yet it's still so even. It's incredible considering this was done with stone tools, but also the walls are flush and hard and show evidence of plaster application. There's a lot going on here, but also there's this opening on the left side of the image that seems to be channelized. Now, considering what we just discussed about how the openings to structures tend to be from the roof, why would there be a channel going into this stone area with steps with very, very smooth, precise walls? Now, again, supposition, but it seems to me this is something of a bathhouse. Possibly not for baths exactly, but I suspect that channel area might be where water was brought in. And the presence of these bowls indicates there was something that needed bowls in the area, in this specific room, in fact. Some kind of liquid, some kind of fluid. Maybe it was for religious reasons. Maybe it was for something else. It's all speculation, but I would posit that while the amphitheater was clearly for group gatherings that may or may not have included religious rituals, possibly like modern churches, they were communal spaces that included religious services, but other things as well, like plays or people giving speeches or telling stories or just holding a town meeting to vote on the new local ordinances, whatever the case may be. This may have been the religious area where they did the sacred things, where the water flows. Perhaps. It's speculation. It's true. But there's so much more effort put into this structure than all of the others. And that to me indicates it increases the probability of it being something sacred, because they put so much more care into it. They put so much more effort into it. They put so much more engineering and innovation and craftsmanship, devotion to getting it right. And people tend to do that when they're in service of something they're devoted to. It doesn't necessarily have to be a god or anything supernatural. It could just be the people. But there's something about this room that is vastly different from the entire rest of the structure or any other structure we found in any of these tepe sites. And it indicates there's something more sacred in some way than all these other structures we found so far. Now, again, there is still a lot to excavate, a lot we haven't seen, and more sites we aren't even aware of yet. Turkey, despite its recent efforts to try to promote archaeology, knowing that these can be tourist sites, still hasn't put a whole lot of effort into funding archaeological studies. These are, some of them anyway, are UNESCO World Heritage sites. But the UN hasn't put a whole bunch of money into funding these either. That's why there are German museums and institutions involved, to get more funding to these sites. But there's still so much more to learn. So I will wrap up with this. We can learn a lot about the present by studying the past. How did we get here? What does it mean? And where could we go? Where could we have gone in the past? Paths that were left abandoned and unexplored that could still be uncovered today. What can we learn about us, where we come from, and where we're going? And whatever you make of all those things, whether you suspect there was some kind of sense of sacredness or purpose, or just people who wanted a really nice bathhouse, whatever you make of all of that, consider that as long as you're willing to question your preconceptions, and as long as you're willing to try to seek out what's true and not just what you'd rather believe, then you too will always be better than religion. We've got a bonus show tonight. Dr. Ben will be joining me for Studying Women's Bible Study, week 3. if I count correctly. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern time. I hope you join for them. For then, and other bonus shows notwithstanding, you'll see me again for sure on Monday for the next Learn Together Live. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks to all our patrons and top-level members for January. Miranda, Karen Butcher, Jessica the Transmetal Alchemist, Robin Webster, Maya Adkisson, Jimmy Tux, Ian Chen, Lilith, Ember Lynn, The Barely Bearable Atheist, Eric Wander, Jason Jacoby, Lil of All Trades, Deviant Outcast, Secular Feelinist, Kelly King, the Detroit Atheist Queen, Geo Sam, Thriver Scapegoat, and Godless Engineer. And you can add your name here next month by signing up at patreon.com/betterthanember or by joining Emberships here on YouTube at the Cinder level, which also includes all the custom emojis, tons of member-exclusive content, member-only live streams, and a bunch of other stuff. I deeply appreciate all the supporters who keep this channel going. Thank you all so much. Because of you, we are building a wonderful community that I'm very proud of.
Just like a spark that springs